New Sherlock Holmes fiction by Gary Lovisi. Hi, I'm Gary Lovisi, and this is new Sherlock Holmes fiction that I've written over the last few years. Um, I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. I've written a lot of nonfiction articles and books about the great detective, but I've also written over the last about 20 years quite a few short stories and novels that have appeared in various places. And they're pretty cool. My thing is, my take on Sherlock Holmes is that I try to do a very traditional Sherlock Holmes and Watson. I try to remain loyal and accurate to the Doyle Sherlock Holmes um, uh, situations, the way he made them, and that's the way I like them. I love to read them, and that's the way I like to write them. And I love writing them. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about 6 or 7 books that I've written and one that I've edited of new Sherlock Holmes stories and pastiches. First one is The Secret Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Ramble House Books from 2007. It contains 3 Sherlock Holmes stories, including The Adventure of the Missing Detective, which is the Edgar-nominated story from the Mystery Writers of America that I was nominated for in 2005. I did not win. Though I was up with Pete Hamill and other people, notable people. Pete Hamill didn't win either. But there's other stories: Mycroft's Great Game, Mycroft's Holmes and Sherlock story, and The Loss of the British Bark, Sophie Anderson, and then an introduction and an afterword by Richard A. Lupoff. So this is the first book in the series. It's Ramble House Books, trade paperback, and there's also a hardcover. Gavin O'Keefe did the cover art, and the thing that's unique about this is we did it in a Dell map back kind of style, where you can see the areas in London where the stories take place and where certain aspects of the story take place. This is a kind of cool book, and that's the first book in the series. These are all first book editions. Stories are reprinted from magazines. Some of the magazines have been Strand Magazine, Sherlock Holmes Mystery magazines, and various book anthologies. Second book is, of course, once you have The Secret Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, when you have other stories, it's more Secret Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So this is the second book in the series. It's Ramble House, trade paperback, 2011. It collects 3 stories along with historical notes. Tico did the cover art. It's 150 pages. And here we have the 3 stories: The Notorious Crosby Murders, A Study in Evil, and The American Adventure, where Sherlock Holmes comes to America when he's young. And there's historical notes on all of these. And there's also an introduction by me on writing the stories. A lot of these stories were appeared in magazines and anthologies that were they had to be cut because of length restrictions and for other reasons. And this restores the original full stories, and the introduction is pretty interesting. A lot of people have commented how much they like it because it gives an inside view about how publishing and the editing process works. And the back cover, a younger picture of me. Gavin O'Keefe again did the design. And the third book in the series, again Ramble House, The Secret Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, book number 3. And Ramble House, trade paperback, 2016. This collects 5 stories, including Happy Birthday, Mr. Holmes. It's 134 pages, and really beautiful cover art. I love the cover art. The book contains 5 stories. And the back cover, again, designed by Gavin O'Keefe. So these are the 3 Ramble House books. They're $15 a piece. They're available the usual places. All these books are available in the usual places. Amazon, ABE, eBay, and on my website, greifenbooks.com, and other places. The next book in the series is really cool, one of my favorites, Sherlock Holmes, The Baron's Revenge. This is a sequel to one of the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories by Doyle, The Case of the Illustrious Client. If you recall that story, it contains one of the most evil villains ever to appear in the series. I would say even more a terrible villain than Moriarty. Maybe Charles Augustus Melverton, the blackmailer, would be up there, but Baron Gruner is the villain in this story. He's the one that basically collects women and has his nefarious deeds destroyed by Holmes, and now he seeks his revenge on Holmes and Watson, and it is a tough, hard-boiled story. Has beautiful art in it. And the cover is by Rob Davis. This is Airship 27 Publications, trade paperback from 2012. It's a first edition trade paperback, 140 pages. And again, it has one of the worst villains ever, Baron Gruner. There's the back cover. Unbelievable, cool, intense book. The next book is a book that I edited, and it's The Great Detective, His Further Adventures. This is Wildside Press. It's a trade paperback, first edition, from 2012, 240 pages. It contains 12 stories by various authors about Sherlock Holmes and his lost cases that never appeared. Table of contents, back cover. This is the Borgo Press, Wildside Press book, and it includes my own story, my Sherlock Holmes golf story, Sherlock Holmes Stymied. The next book is a very interesting one. The Mystery Surrounding Watson's Lost Dispatch Box. This is a Juan and Viejo mystery. Juan is a young, streetwise punk kid, about 18, 19 years old, thinks he knows everything. Viejo, old man in Spanish, is a retired professor who owns a bookstore, and turns out that a young man comes in one day into the bookstore and has a Strand magazine along with some original papers that are from Dr. John Watson, and it leads Juan and Viejo into one of the most wild cases of drug dealing, and this is a contemporary crime novel taking place in a small New England town where in most of the Main Street areas, it's a really quaint, beautiful little town to live, village to live, but then there's other areas where it's dark and very deadly, and where a criminal gang controls everything and has gotten away with everything for many, many years, and there's a master criminal at work, and it's a wild story. It's a wild story, and it takes in all kinds of Sherlockian elements. The Sherlock Holmes influence never wanes on this, and it's a really, I think, excellent book. Here's the back cover, and this is from MX Publishing in the UK from 2014. This is the first edition. It's a trade paperback. There is no US edition of it, and that's also $15. I mentioned a little bit a while ago about Happy Birthday, Mr. Holmes, and that's this little booklet here. It's a small chapbook. I published it myself, Gryphon Books, in 2016. The cover art is by Lucille Cali, who did a pretty good job. She's a very talented young lady. It's a 28-page chapbook, and it was specially published for the Baker Street Irregulars meeting in 2016 in New York City. Each year, the Baker Street Irregulars have a party to celebrate Sherlock Holmes' birthday in January, and we just did this as a special Happy Birthday, Mr. Holmes, for that 2016 gathering. This is its signed edition, 221 copies. That's in the back cover. And it's $10, and it's 28 pages. It's a cool story. It's a cool story about Watson wanting to give Sherlock Holmes, his good friend, a birthday party on his 50th year, which is a milestone. He reached the age of 50, and Watson wants to do something special for him, and Sherlock Holmes will not, under any condition, allow a birthday party, and he's driving Watson crazy. And then, at the last minute, Holmes says, "Okay, I want the party," and Watson is going like, "What?" And then he's got to do all kinds of tumble salts, get together with Mycroft and other people to have a party, but the party gets out of control, and there's all kinds of things going on in the party that, Holmes has actually decided there's some very interesting background stuff that's going to happen. So without giving too much away, I just want to let you know that there's a lot of surprises. And the last book of my Sherlock Holmes, I'm very proud of all of these. Greg Shepard of Starkhouse Books does Starkhouse Books, of course, but he also has done a new series called Black Gat Books. This is number 11, and it's Sherlock Holmes and Mr. Mac. Now, this is a paperback size book from 2017. It's the first edition, paperback original, and it teams up Sherlock Holmes and Watson with the only Scotland Yard detective who he respected, and that was Inspector Alec MacDonald. And if you remember from the Valley of Fear, in the beginning of that adventure, he mentions about Inspector MacDonald and how he has great respect for him and sees a great career ahead. And there's two stories, The Affair of Lady Westcott's Lost Ruby and The Case of the Unseen Assassin, where Inspector MacDonald is involved in cases where he actually asks Holmes for help. And this is the back cover. That's $10 from Starkhouse Press, and it's Black Gat book number 11. So there you have a little taste of 7 of the books that I've done on Sherlock Holmes. I am a Sherlockian. I collect Sherlock Holmes. I've collected every kind of book on Sherlock Holmes for like 40 years, and 1983, I wrote my first article on Sherlock Holmes pastiche paperbacks in Paperback Advertiser. Some of you may remember that. It's a long time ago. And I've done a lot of non-fiction on Sherlock Holmes. But this is my fiction. I always try my best to tell the stories the way Doyle would have told them. You don't see vampires and fairies and ghosts and goblins and zombies and all of that stuff in these stories. You see Sherlock Holmes the way he was portrayed by, for instance, Basil Rathbone or Jeremy Brett or even Benedict Cumberbatch today. The traditional Holmes, but not boring, because there's all kinds of wild, unbelievable cases that come up, twists and turns, surprises, and I try to keep the reader interested, and I try to keep them guessing, and I don't think that a lot of these stories and books you're going to kind of guess too far ahead what's going to happen. So again, I love Sherlock Holmes. I love the creation that Doyle has given to the world, and I'm really very privileged to have the opportunity to write these stories, and I hope that you like them. And if you want to give them a try, you can order them in the usual places, and also through my website. You see in the description below. And if you want signed copies, if you order from me, I'll be glad to sign them. And again, I want to do from time to time on some of the videos some of my own writing, my own work, because I've been a writer for 40 years and have a lot of books to my credit, and including the story that I mentioned in the first book, The Adventure of the Missing Detective, which was nominated by the Mystery Writers of America for their Edgar Award. So it did have that. That's a proud achievement, and shows the quality of some of my work. So with that, I'd just like to say, long live Sherlock Holmes, and I hope you enjoy this video, and maybe give one of these books a try if it tickles your fancy, if you're interested. And again, don't forget, give us a like and a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to have more great new stuff coming up. So keep posted, and thank you very much for taking a look.